Sometimes the most emotional goodbyes don't come with tears or big speeches. Sometimes they come with a final bow, a wink toward a cousin in the crowd, and a mother quietly sharing the moment on her own Instagram stories because words almost feel unnecessary. That's exactly what happened when Joaquin Consuelos, the youngest son of Kelly/Ripa and Mark Consuelos, took his final bow in the Broadway revival of Death of a Salesman. And if you've been following this family story even a little, you already know this wasn't just the end of a theater run. It was the closing of a chapter that started years earlier, quietly, far away from the cameras, long before Broadway marquees ever entered the picture. To understand why this moment hit so many people emotionally, you have to go back. Not to opening night in April. Further than that. Back to a college kid in Michigan, wrestling on a mat instead of performing on a stage, studying theater almost on the side, without any guarantee that any of it would lead anywhere near Broadway. Because that's the part of this story that makes the ending feel so earned. Joaquin wasn't handed this. He built toward it in the way most 20-somethings build toward anything, uncertain and one small step at a time. He studied theater at the University of Michigan while also competing on the wrestling team, which is its own kind of quiet discipline. Long before Broadway, before opening night photos and proud Instagram captions, he was simply a young guy discovering what he wanted his life to look like. That's part of why this closing night feels different from a typical celebrity headline. It isn't really about fame. It's about watching someone find themselves in real time with a famous family standing just close enough to catch him if it didn't work out, and just far enough away to let him actually try. Now, fast forward to April of this year. Joaquin steps into the revival of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, playing the younger version of Christopher Abbott's character, Biff Loman. If you know the play, you know there's something almost poetic about that role. Biff is a young man wrestling with identity, with the weight of family expectation, with the question of who he's supposed to become versus who he actually is. It's hard not to wonder whether playing that role night after night meant something a little deeper to Joaquin than just landing a great part in a great show. And here's where the story gets even more layered, because Joaquin's Broadway debut didn't happen alone. Just days after his opening night, his father, Mark Consuelos, made his own Broadway debut in a revival of Fallen Angels. Think about that for a second. A father and son both stepping onto Broadway stages for the very first time, within the same stretch of days in the same city at completely different theaters, but somehow living parallel milestones at the exact same moment in their lives. That's not something you can manufacture for a headline. That's the kind of coincidence that feels almost written by someone with a sense of humor about how life actually works. For Kelly, that meant something else entirely. It meant being the one constant in the audience, watching two of the most important men in her life step into a spotlight neither of them had stood in before. She didn't just show up once. She showed up, she posted, she celebrated, she let the world see how proud she was, not in a performative celebrity way, but in the way any parent lights up watching their kid do something they've clearly worked hard for. And that's really the emotional through line of this entire family, isn't it? It's not that they're famous. It's that they still seem to genuinely enjoy showing up for each other. Which brings us to the ending. Death of a Salesman wrapped its run, and Joaquin marked the occasion the way a lot of young performers do now, with a video from backstage, the cast taking their final bow together. Nothing overly produced. Nothing scripted. Just a group of people who spent months building something together, sharing one last moment before it became a memory instead of a nightly ritual. He even included a small, unguarded detail. A clip, later taken down, of a cousin catching him sneak a wink toward the camera during that final bow. It's such a tiny thing, barely a few seconds, but it says so much. Even in a moment as significant as closing night on Broadway, he still had family close enough to catch him being playful, being himself, being 23 and a little silly in the middle of something huge. That's the detail people connect with. Not the show itself, but the reminder that even inside major milestones, this family still finds room for the small, human, unglamorous moments. The wink. The inside joke. The cousin filming from the crowd instead of a professional photographer. And then there's Kelly. She didn't write a long, emotional caption. She didn't need to. She simply shared what Joaquin had already posted, letting his moment stay his moment, while still making sure her own audience knew exactly how much it meant to her. Sometimes the most powerful support isn't loud. Sometimes it's just showing up, again in the way you've shown up 100 times before. Viewers picked up on that too. The response beneath Joaquin's post wasn't just polite congratulations. People described being moved by the production itself, some saying they'd seen the show multiple times, others calling it one of the most powerful things they'd witnessed on stage all year. When strangers feel compelled to say they saw a show 3 times and told everyone they knew to see it too, That's not manufactured buzz. That's real emotional impact, the kind no publicist can fabricate. So why does a 23-year-old's closing night matter this much to people who've never met him? Maybe it's because so many viewers have watched this family for over 2 decades now, through Kelly's mornings on live television, through Mark stepping into that co-host chair, through years of hearing about 3 kids growing up somewhere just off camera. There's a strange, real intimacy that builds when you watch someone's family evolve in the background of your own daily routine. You start to feel invested, almost like you know them even though you never actually will. And there's something else worth noticing here, something a little quieter beneath the surface. In interviews around the show's run, Joaquin talked about not wanting to limit himself, about wanting to try everything now that this particular chapter was ending. That's not just a throwaway comment. That's the sound of someone standing at the edge of something new, a little nervous, a little excited, trying to figure out what comes next. Anyone who has ever finished a big chapter of their own life, a degree, a job, a relationship, a project they poured themselves into, knows exactly that feeling. The relief and the sadness that arrive at the exact same time. It also says something about how Kelly and Mark seem to have raised their kids. Because so much of what gets said about Joaquin publicly, by his family and by people who've worked alongside him, points toward humility. A young man who reportedly attended an audition on behalf of his own brother before deciding to pursue acting himself. Someone who still leans on family, still texts his mom about auditions, still gets teased and celebrated in equal measure online. In an industry that can inflate a person's ego overnight, that kind of groundedness doesn't happen by accident. There's a version of this story that could have been told very differently. It could have been framed as just another nepotism narrative, another famous kid stepping into an industry his parents already dominate. But that's not really what's resonating with people. What's resonating is the work. The years at Michigan. The wrestling mat before the stage. The choice to study theater seriously instead of simply borrowing a famous last name. The slow, unglamorous climb that made this Broadway run actually mean something when it finally arrived. And now that chapter has closed. The lights have gone down on that particular run. The cast has taken its final bow. Joaquin has a few television projects reportedly on the horizon, but by his own admission, part of him is still mourning the ending even as he looks ahead. That's a very human contradiction, wanting the next thing while still missing the thing you just finished. Maybe that's the real reason this story struck a chord with so many people. Not because it's about a celebrity family, but because underneath all of it, it's about something almost universal. Growing up. Trying something new. Having people in your corner who show up, who post the video, who wear the sweatshirt, who sit in the audience for opening night, and who are still there quietly proud when the curtain finally comes down. Perhaps that's the real thread running through the entire Consuelos Ripa family story. Not the fame, not the decades on television, not even the Broadway debuts happening almost side by side. It's the fact that after all these years, they still show up for each other in ways that feel completely genuine, the kind of support that doesn't need a caption to mean something. So here's a question worth sitting with. What did this moment mean to you? Was it the wink toward the camera? The father and son stepping onto Broadway within days of each other? Or simply watching a mother quietly, proudly share her son's ending without needing to make it about anything more than that? Drop your thoughts below, and let us know which Kelly and Mark family moment has stayed with you the most. Sometimes the biggest milestones aren't announced with fanfare at all. Sometimes they're just a final bow, a small wink, and a family that never stops showing up.